Can I thank you? Thanks to Marissa for helping me out. Sorry about that, you guys. So I'm going to start over again, just with the talk part. So basically, our ancestors from the Mesolithic and Neolithic, which would be the Middle Stone Age and the New Stone Age, so that's how far back we're talking about. If we believe that they have, oh, I'm so glad, it sounds good. Thank you, Christina. My apologies to everyone. But if we believe these people have wisdom about we in the modern world can be more harmonious with the land and animals and protector spirits, and if we hold that idea, then if we believe the idea that our healed ancestors of the past have wisdom, then one of the ways we can access that communion with our healed ancestors, and when I say healed ancestors, I'm talking about people you've never met in your family. So we're talking maybe ancestors from thousands of years ago. One of the ways we can do that is by discovering how they saw the world. So when it comes to the winter time and the ritual honoring activities, it's amazing, I think, that Elen of the Ways, this reindeer goddess that we're talking about, and she can be represented in so many different ways, and I'll be talking a little bit about different kinds of deer, so not just reindeer, but also deer or red deer. So just kind of like open up the definition of what we're talking about here. But it's amazing to me that she's survived somehow in our celebrations throughout the years. And I didn't even know about her until a few years ago. So within, this is about a little bit about my introduction to Elen. So within about a year after I started leaving offerings outside to helping spirits and various other beings, I started to hear songs and sounds that were kind of like Christmas sleigh bells, so kind of like a jingle jingle. And this was around, the sleigh bell sound happened around the holiday season. So my first impulse was like, okay, it's just the holidays. I'm just, thinking about sleigh bells, whatever, So I kind of blew it off. But Elen and the deer spirits persisted. Next, I remembered hearing the song Jingle, Jingle, Jingle. I don't know if you guys know that from, I'm sure you guys know that from the Rudolph, the Red-Nosed Reindeer Burl Ives special. So there was more musical nudges. And I felt compelled to perhaps try to connect with her in some way. So when I first, this was a couple years ago, so when I first tested out a shamanic practice where I merged with Elen, because I thought, I can just go ahead and jump in and do that. I remember the energy being so electric that it really kind of freaked me out. Not in a horrible way, just a little bit. So I didn't feel afraid of her, like, running away screaming or anything, but I certainly felt reluctant to just jump in and merge with her again. Mostly because of like a nervous system kind of problem. So after this happened, it was like Elen, I felt, this is hindsight, of course, 2020, when you look back and you're able to say, okay, I think I know what was happening now. But I think at this point, Elen was trying more gentle imagery with me to try and ease me into the relationship and to not be so afraid of the electric kind of energy that she has. And that was just my interpretation of her. So one of the ways that this happened, which is kind of funny, is sometimes the spirits will like communicate with me through movies and music or like, pop culture stuff. And I'm sure some of you guys have that experience too. So one example is when, again, this is like hindsight 2020, I think Elen was trying to communicate with me. So she would replay this scene in my head from Tommy Boy, which I shared on Facebook a week or so ago. It's that movie with Chris Farley and David Spade. And the scene she would play in my head was when they think they've hit a deer. They put the deer in the back seat of their car, and they think the deer is dead. and they're very sad about it, of course. And then what happens is the deer wakes up and starts ripping apart the car, which has a convertible like canvas top, so that the antlers are able to like just poke through the canvas, and finally, you know, the hooves are shredding the roof, and the deer ends up on top of the car looking very majestic. And right before it leaps to run away, you see this shot of its back hoof beeping the steering wheel car horn. So there's that little shot of the foot, you know, kind of going beep beep. So what she would do is she would just clip that part in my head of the beep beep, you know, so that I knew it was her, you know, and then the deer runs away. So, and I think that was just kind of her way of like saying, you know, yeah, it was, you know, a little intense energy, but, you know, let's ease into this. So a little bit of background about deer, just to give you some history and stuff. Deer is another cross-cultural medicine animal in Northern Europe, but not exclusive to Northern Europe. And it was associated with Mesolithic period rituals, which is Middle Stone Age, and of course the British goddess Elen, which we're talking about, and the winter solstice. So for example, there's an illustration, some of you guys might have seen this on the internet, of a female shaman, and forgive my German pronunciation, sometimes it's okay, sometimes not. It's Bad Dürrenberg. She's a tall female ritual leader from 8,000 years ago. So we're talking 6,000 BC. And her headdress is made with antler, it's made from a deer, and from also boar tusks and animal teeth. And it's been reconstructed by researchers, so that if you, it's one of the pictures I don't have today, but I'm going to show you some other pictures in a minute. But they reconstructed it. So if you like look up Bad Dürrenberg shaman, you'll see this reconstructed picture of this female shaman. And she was disabled and buried with ritual grave goods. And ritual headdresses are made from deer antlers that were found. And also skulls with antlers also appeared around the same time at Star Car, which is in Yorkshire, in the UK, which I believe our Leonie Clark is going to be presenting next week, and I believe she's from Yorkshire. So, yes, I'll be happy to, yeah, any of the spellings and things, you know, various people that we're talking about, they're in the PDF, which, by the way, the PDF is the free gift. So everything I'm talking about, you're going to see in the PDF, but I can definitely get your comments. So while researching about Ellen, I happened to do a ritual in a class setting where I focused primarily on her. So during the ritual, if you can picture, like, I don't know if you guys have seen these, I'm sure you have. They're Himalayan salt candle holders where you can put a votive inside the candle. So it's kind of circular, the perimeter is circular. So if you can just picture that when I'm talking about this. So during the ritual, I was able to see the spirit of the deer dancing around this circular perimeter of the flame. And this image, while this is happening in the ritual, reminded me of the old stone circles. Of course, Stonehenge being the famous one, but there's so many more. And those stone circles are kind of more associated with Neolithic, but I think they were around, well, no, they're more Neolithic. And what it did during the ritual is kind of like trigger my mind in a positive way, of course, into that, you know, what might have been that kind of circular motion around the stone circle, and just seeing that deer, this little tiny miniature deer in my ritual, just going around the flame in a circle, just like that, was really, really fascinating. And that kind of made me think about the ritual feasting that might have happened during that time, especially during the winter. So one of the ways in waking reality that I found the spirit of Ellen was while watching an archaeological show, believe it or not. I don't know if you guys have heard of Time Team. And sometimes they'll do stuff about the Mesolithic or Neolithic. And those are the programs I really, really like, you know. So this particular program was where the veneration of the deer might have been key. And so this particular instance where I had kind of like a communion with Ellen was I was watching this segment of Time Team, and the archaeologist, his name is Mike Parker Pearson, was describing some of the feasts and that took place during the wintertime, and the bones and what way they were buried. And basically all you need to know is some were ritually buried and others were part of the feast. And that point I just thought was really important, because that just shows the feasting being kind of this very sacred, you know, occurrence. So when Mike Parker Pearson talked about the boar, here's those pop culture references again, and I was thinking about Ellen, or the reindeer and red deer. I heard a spirit guide singing a song, "We Go Together," which is that Grease song, you know? Another bizarre way they communicate. And I think what they were referring to, "we go together," was the boar and the deer, as I mentioned just a minute ago with the Bad Durenberg shaman, where they, you know, recreated the boar tusks and the antler headdress. So that was just an interesting little thing that happened, I thought. More recently, I went on a shamanic journey to visit an ancient ancestor who we found out was a hunter of deer. And this was very interesting. One of his messages during the shamanic journey was that it was a difficult emotional reconciliation to realize that you are basically, and don't laugh when I say this, because when I say it, it's going to sound funny, but when you're hunting your friends. He said, he just kept saying that. He said, you know, this animal, this deer, is very sacred to us, and he's a trusted friend, she is a trusted friend, and provides so much for everyone in the community. And he just kept saying to me, it's difficult to have to hunt your friends. But then at the same time, on the other side of that difficult emotion, he also said, but there's a way to do it while honoring the sacred spirit of the animal and, you know, the community and yourself, and of course, you know, your relationship with that sacred animal, and to keep it ongoing. And the details of that are different, but which I haven't quite gotten into yet. But he just said basically that's all you need to know right now. So during this journey with this particular ancestor, he also showed me like kind of shades of his cave where he lived, and all I remember seeing for the most part was this like reindeer pelt or deer pelt hanging somehow on the wall. And so that leads me into this next example of but before I say that, maybe this is why you always hear about, if you read archaeology or just in general history or whatever, you always hear about grave goods with animal bones being buried alongside ancient peoples. And I don't know why, but after having that journey, that really kind of made that reading fact kind of a little more visceral. So I want to share a quote from a woman named Natalia Mikolova, and this is about the cult of the deer. So this is what she says. The cult of the deer had great significance in the ideology of the ancient population of northern Eurasia. It was formed in the Upper Paleolithic, so she thinks it goes back even into the Paleolithic, which I thought was interesting, It was developed in the Mesolithic and remained throughout the Neolithic, Bronze, and Iron Ages. The main components of the cult were cosmological and totemistic myths and rites of fertility and hunting success. Sacred places were the material component of the cult. The remnants of the cult were preserved in the culture and religious beliefs of these northern peoples until the 20th century. I mean, that I didn't expect to see that, the 20th century. And if I had to guess, little sidebar here, and then I'll go back to her quote, I would guess that the 20th century cultures that maintained it would be either Sami or Siberian. You know, I'm sure you guys have more information about that too. So she continues on, myths and rites were the main components of the cult, and deer worship was the essential side of the rituals. So a great number of archaeological sites of Eurasia can be interpreted as sacred places connected with the cult of the deer. And in some of those Paleolithic caves, which I'm sure you guys have heard about in France and parts of Spain, northern Spain to southern France is this area called the Franco-Cantabrian zone, but that doesn't matter. All you need to know is that's the area we're talking about. And there's numerous depiction of deer and deer heads, and the process of the depictions was part of the ritual activity of the primeval hunters. So I want to show you, for example, a picture of, this is from, you can see this on Wikipedia. This is actually from Lascaux, and some of you probably already know about Lascaux, but Lascaux is basically a very old cave where there's a lot of animal art, cave paintings. But I think it's more than just art. I think it's part of their cosmology. I think it's part of all of our cosmology. So this is from that, and I think this is called a megaloceros. So the process of the depictions was part of the ritual activities of primeval hunters. So you can just picture that, that deer. The evidence of rituals is the refreshing and repeating of deer pictures. So if you can picture, like in the cave, just refreshing and repeating deer pictures. The deer depictions marked the entrances, borders of chambers, and the remote places of the caves. So the deer had the role of mediator between people and others. And a lot of you guys who are into, like, you don't even have to be into shamanism to see the significance here. Just the thinning of the veils concept, right? Between the humans and the others. You can see that the deer kind of is the go-between between those two states of being. So now I want to get into Elen and shamanic flight. So some of you guys might have heard about the images of flying reindeer being related also with the red and white colors of the fly agaric mushroom. And sometimes that, well, it's been said, common research has been said that those mushrooms kind of grow near pine trees. And the deer was known to go, you know, around those areas. So this is about an article, this is a quote from an article by Carolyn Wise, where she said, Ellen led me to suspect that the lays, L-E-Y-S, spirit pathways, so like energetic spirit pathways basically on the land, also functioned as shamanic flight paths. And they were traveled with the aid of the fly agaric mushroom. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. For those of you guys into the Latin pronunciation, it's Amanita muscaria. But basically this fly agaric mushroom was obtained in a non-toxic form via the urine of the reindeer. So that explains how, like, the fly agaric mushroom is toxic, but yet humans were able to ingest it through the urine of the reindeer. So I wanted to mention some of the images where I've seen or felt Ellen or the deer spirit in kind of a shamanic flight mode. And this was really recent, actually. When I was on my first shamanic wild hunt journey, which is part of the Nordic traditions, and that was done by Evelyn Rysdijk. I asked Ellen to be there and was pleased to see her antlers, even if it was just for a brief moment. She was one of the guardian animals, along with a power animal, who helped kind of protect me from many of the souls of the dead that were passing over during that journey. And they were being passed over to the other side by Freya and the shamanic practitioners like Evelyn and some of the other people. So this experience helped me to bond a lot more with Ellen, just kind of feeling that stability and protection, who, as I mentioned, when I first met her a few years ago, it was kind of intense. So then I found out that deer is one of the animal spirits, like we kind of mentioned before, that can be a guide for both shamans and the souls of the dead through the spirit world. I'm going to show you guys another picture here. This is a silver goblet found in the, and I had to look this up, it's called Thracian, but I think it's off the Danube River, basically. And this is a, you'll see, if you can see this, let me see if I can get closer. Can you see the 8-legged deer spirit here? This is the top of the goblet. And, whoops, top of the goblet. And then, the bottom is just kind of, there's not much there. But you can see, let's see if I can get close. There we go. Can you see the legs there? There's like 8 of them. And so the first thing I thought of when I saw that was, oh yeah, followers of Odin will recognize the 8-legged horse of, let's hope I pronounce it right, Sleipnir. So some of you, and that's in the, all these 2 pictures I showed you so far are in the free gift PDF. So when I did a shamanic journey of Nepalese origin, there was a section in the journey where you invoke the gold, silver, and iron fields. And when we got to the silver part of the journey, which was in the middle, I saw, in the journey state, I saw Elen, a deer, silhouetted over the face of the moon. And it was just her by herself. It wasn't a whole set of reindeer or anything. It was just her by herself. And then in between the silver and iron layers, I saw what looked like, if you can picture, seeing hooves digging really fast into the ground, which I thought was really interesting. And I still need to do more study and reading to figure out the deeper meaning of that. But on another occasion, I did the shamanic journey again, this similar gold, silver, iron layers, and I kept seeing an image of her when the silver layer was invoked. So, and again with the moon, and I could see her antlers. So she definitely has a connection to the moon and silver, at least, during this Nepalese journey. So it'd be interesting to find out more of the meaning behind that. But they did, her spirit as well as the other spirits along helped clear out negative energy, because I felt tons better afterwards. So there must be some kind of, I would lead one to believe that once you start working with her, that she, which makes sense when you think about it logically, if we think about the fact that she leads people, and is that connection between us and the others, that she would probably have the ability to clear negative energy as well, So I wanted to share another quote about, this is from Paul Devereaux. Some of you guys, if you're into ley lines or sacred sites, you might have heard of a guy named Paul Devereaux. And he's talking about shamanic trance consciousness in like sacred landscapes. But this is about a completely different area of the world. This is about South Africa. And this is about the San, S-A-N, or Bushman rock art in southern, it's not South Africa, it's Southern Africa. Sorry, my apologies. So this San, Southern African rock art, he says it repeatedly displays a curious figure known to archaeologists as a flying buck. Recent research confirmed by the San themselves. So for me, like if I'm reading stuff like about archaeology or anthropology, I always love it when they find actual indigenous tribes who confirm things, because it just makes it like even better. Like that's obviously ideal. So they show that that the San themselves and even suspected by Joseph Campbell, the late Joseph Campbell, that this creature, which lines trailing out behind it, represents the out-of-body shaman who transforms into an antelope and then flies. This image is now sometimes referred to as a trance buck by archaeologists because of this. So I wanted to tell you more about the fly agaric mushroom from Carolyn Wise's book, from her article. She talks about, in this quote, about how a group of people imbibed the fly agaric mushroom. So she says in 1990, this group went off to, and our UK people, forgive me for mispronouncing this. This is an area called Oxleas, Oxleas. I think it's outside London somewhere, but she made it sound like it was a forest that they were trying to protect. So they went off to this area with someone who knew the woods intimately, and they would sit with them during their trip of this, shamanic trip, that is. So they had pine resin. There's those pine trees. Pine resin collected from the local trees was used as incense, so that the occasion was given a sacred setting. On return, they reported an experience of the reindeer people, which I thought was super cool, and their relationship to the deer. They brought back a lot of information that later checked out, and they also said that they'd been told that Elen meant star path. Interesting. It seemed natural to link her to Cygnus. Some of you guys might know Cygnus as the swan, due to her swan and cross associations. And the recent discoveries about Cygnus from Andrew Collins now give a new dimension to Elen's shamanic credentials. So now we can kind of group Elen in a shamanic context. So now I want to tell you about a past life regression experience from a client, and this is going to be her words. This is part of a past life regression involving past lives where we are our own ancestors. So she continues, I saw my death and then went back to a time when there was a feeling of dread caused by the church for not letting us do our rituals and honor our ancestors the way we wanted to. At first we thought it would be okay, but then it was very oppressive. In this lifetime where I was rebelling against these restrictions and getting punished by the community in a brutal way, for a while I became this woman and felt real fear and dread as she was being executed. Then, seeing my descendants deciding this kind of spiritual connection was a bad idea and trying to bury their gifts by ignoring them. So before I saw all of this, she continues, my ancestral helping spirit, Elen, came to me and showed me a lifetime where I was learning about ritual around a fire, just myself and an elder, maybe another family member. It felt very calm and centering. She told me this was the healing, being able to access this place and memory again. And then she returned after the dread and fear passed and reminded me of this same message again. And the client continues, I followed up this experience by doing another session, by going back into this scene, this particular scene with this elder, another helping spirit for me. He asked me some of the questions, the elder did, in the session description for past life regression with another person. So she continues, I met the ancestor at the fire. He showed me the lifetime. He asked me, what had I learned? So I realized then that in the past life, I behaved in that rebellious way to save some piece of my family's traditions, so that it would not become so hidden that it would be completely forgotten or lost. And besides the release of energy and insights that these past life regressions sessions have taught me, I finally got on a visceral level that people can reincarnate along family bloodlines. And I've been taught this in other traditions, but this helped that idea become more real. Plus, it definitely freed up energy around trusting my gifts. So, I wanted to tell you about the Kundalini pathways of the land, and start off with a personal story about my sister and I, Marissa Lovett. We were at a mound, basically. It's a park called Emerson Point. It's not far from where we live. Well, it's about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. But it's a state park that's near a Native American burial ground. And we were there before either one of us became initiates of the Andean path. So we were walking near this mound, and we had been trying to connect with this sacred place by bringing our medicine bundles at the time, which were kind of like, were slightly different than the ones we have now. But during this process of walking around the park and just trying to kind of commune with the sacred place, we somehow kind of got turned around and got lost a little bit. It was a little bit wooded. I mean, we're not talking about a major forest here. We're just talking about kind of like just feeling turned around. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a butterfly goes right in front of us and is maybe like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 feet in front of us, and is literally leading us down these steps that we were walking down that were kind of, in wood, basically, because we were trying to figure out which path to go back to. And the butterfly just led us down into the path. And then once we got to that kind of main trail, we were like, okay, now this looks familiar. And so I think that looking back, hindsight, I think an aspect, of course there were local spirits and local land spirits that come into play there in a big way. But I think also an aspect of the deer hunter or tracker is also kind of an example of how we found our way back to that particular main path, that kind of ability to track the land or sense that we may feel as we're communing with the land and the nature spirits when we kind of find our way. I think that might be derived a little bit from our ancient relationship with the reindeer and the deer spirit, and of course of Elen. So I like to visualize Elen's antlers as kind of like shamanic antennae, tuning in on the energetic pathways of the land. And so Carolyn Wise, I wanted to read you another quote about her. Elen of the Ways in true shamanic style is a walker between the worlds, above in astral flight and into inner space via her plants and fungi. On the ground, we have her deer tracks and lays, they call them. And above the path of the Milky Way, so there's the stars we're talking about, was traversed by Helena's constellation of the Swan. Whatever direction we follow her, she leads us to shamanic mysteries. And she says in Quicksilver Heritage, Paul Screeton, who's an editor of The Lay Hunter, he talks about holy wells. So those of you guys who are really into sacred water, this one's for you. So he lists holy wells as lay markers, so like energetic lay markers on the land, saying many wells were dedicated to Saint Helen, a confusion with Elen, the Celtic goddess of roads and armies. And he also says Elen, reputedly the daughter of King Cole, and please forgive my pronunciation, you guys can hopefully I'll say this right. So Elen, reputedly the daughter of King Cole, is Albion's equivalent of Thoth, Hermes, and Mercury. So when I think of Mercury, I think of communication. And she, according to the Mabinogion, built a system of roads from one castle to another throughout the Isle of Britain. So this suggests that the construction of trackways, there's that tracking, following the placing of stones, mounds, one-tree hills, etc., to mark the lays. Ellen, or the Christianized Saint Helen, has given rise to such names on leis as Heel, and Ellie stones.